Tasha K didn't break this story. She detonated it. What emerged from behind closed doors in the Burruss-Tucker household wasn't just betrayal. It was a boundary-crossing crisis that left Hollywood speechless and a family forever changed. When the world looked at Kandi Burruss and Todd Tucker, they saw success. A power couple who'd built an empire together. A blended family that seemed to work against all odds. Reality television cameras captured their highs and lows, but always with that polished shine that makes audiences believe they're seeing everything. Except they weren't. Because underneath the choreographed moments and carefully managed public appearances, something was shifting. Something that would eventually tear apart not just a marriage, but the very foundation of trust that held an entire household together. For years, Kandi had been the embodiment of ambition and resilience. From her days dominating the music charts to her reign on reality television, she'd proven herself capable of handling pressure, criticism, and the relentless scrutiny that comes with fame. Todd entered her life as a producer, someone who understood the industry, someone who seemed to complement her drive with his own steady presence. Their wedding was celebrated, their partnership admired, and when they blended their families, bringing Riley into a new dynamic with a stepfather, the narrative seemed almost too perfect. The American dream wrapped in celebrity packaging. But families are complex ecosystems. What looks harmonious from the outside can mask tension, confusion, and boundaries that slowly begin to blur when no one's paying close enough attention. Inside the Burruss-Tucker home, a shift was occurring. Subtle at first. The kind of change that happens so gradually that it's easy to rationalize, to explain away, to convince yourself that everything's fine even when instinct whispers otherwise. Riley had always been close to her mother. Their bond was well documented, public, celebrated even. When Todd became part of their lives, the adjustment period seemed smooth. Too smooth, perhaps, because what began as a stepfather trying to connect with his new stepdaughter reportedly evolved into something far more complicated. Time spent together increased. Conversations grew longer, more private. The nature of their interactions started raising quiet questions among those who witnessed them. Not loud alarms, not obvious red flags, just that uncomfortable feeling that something about the dynamic didn't quite sit right. Those who knew the family well began noticing patterns. Todd's attention toward Riley seemed disproportionate, not in ways that could be easily called out or confronted, but in ways that felt increasingly inappropriate to those paying attention. The way conversations would shift when others entered the room. The private jokes that excluded everyone else, the amount of time they'd spend together without Kandi present. Individually, these moments could be dismissed. Collectively, they painted a picture that made people uneasy. Kandi focused on managing her businesses, her television commitments, and the constant demands of public life, initially missed the signs. Or perhaps she saw them but convinced herself they meant something different. It's easier to trust the people you love than to question whether something darker might be developing right under your nose. Mothers want to believe their children are safe in their own homes. Wives want to trust that their husbands understand boundaries. But eventually, the evidence becomes too substantial to ignore. The turning point came when Kandi began paying closer attention to the interactions happening around her. Small details that hadn't registered before suddenly stood out in sharp relief. The way Riley and Todd communicated, the frequency of their private conversations, the tone that had shifted from familial to something that felt charged with an energy that shouldn't exist between a stepfather and stepdaughter. And then came the discovery that would change everything. Messages, private exchanges that were never meant to be seen by anyone else. Communication that revealed a level of emotional entanglement that crossed every conceivable boundary. The content of these messages, according to those familiar with what Kandi uncovered, wasn't innocent. It wasn't the normal back and forth between a parent figure and a young adult. It was inappropriate. It was concerning. And it confirmed every suspicion that had been building in Kandi's mind. Suspicions she'd been trying desperately to convince herself were unfounded. The moment of discovery is described by insiders as devastating. Picture finding evidence that shatters your understanding of your own family, that forces you to question every interaction you've witnessed, every moment you dismissed, every time you chose trust over suspicion. Kandi wasn't just facing betrayal from her husband, she was grappling with the realization that her daughter had been involved in a dynamic that never should have existed. The emotional impact was immediate and crushing. What followed was an explosion of emotion that those close to the situation describe as unlike anything they'd witnessed. Confrontations that laid bare years of hidden behavior, tears, rage, disbelief, and a profound sense of violation that cut deeper than any public scandal ever could. This wasn't about tabloid headlines or social media gossip. This was about a mother realizing that the safety and boundaries she believed protected her family had been compromised in the most personal way imaginable. Riley, caught in the aftermath, reportedly struggled to process her own role in what had happened. The complexity of a young person navigating confused feelings, blurred boundaries, and the influence of an adult who should have known better created a situation where blame became complicated. Was she a victim of manipulation? Had she made choices she now regretted? The answer, according to those familiar with the situation, likely contained elements of both. But regardless of where responsibility lay, the damage was undeniable. Todd found himself facing accusations that went beyond typical marital infidelity. This wasn't about him seeking connection outside the marriage with a stranger. This was about him allegedly developing an inappropriate relationship with his stepdaughter, crossing lines that exist specifically to protect young people within family structures. His failure to maintain proper boundaries, to recognize the power dynamic at play, and to shut down any inappropriate development decisively made him the target of intense scrutiny and condemnation. For Kandi, the path forward became painfully clear. There was no salvaging a marriage built on this level of betrayal. There was no returning to normal when normal had been revealed as an illusion. Protection of her children became the only priority, and that protection required decisive action. Separation from Todd, legal proceedings to formalize the end of their union, and most importantly, creating distance between Riley and the stepfather who had allegedly violated the trust placed in him. The decision to divorce wasn't made lightly, but it was made with absolute certainty. Sources close to Kandi describe her as devastated but resolute, heartbroken but clear-eyed about what needed to happen. The evidence she'd uncovered left no room for reconciliation. Trust, once shattered this completely, doesn't repair. And when children are involved, when their safety and well-being hang in the balance, there's no choice but to act with the full force of protective instinct. As word of the situation began to leak beyond the immediate family, speculation intensified. Whispers became rumors. Rumors became theories. And in the midst of this growing storm, Tasha K entered the picture with the kind of investigative determination that would ultimately blow the story wide open. Tasha K built her platform on fearless reporting and willingness to dig into stories others avoided. Her approach has always been direct, unflinching, and sometimes controversial. When she caught wind of what was happening behind the scenes in the Burruss-Tucker household, she didn't just report surface-level gossip, she went deep. She sought sources. She pursued documentation. She pieced together a narrative that would force the public to confront uncomfortable truths about a family they thought they knew. What Tasha K allegedly uncovered and subsequently shared wasn't speculation or hearsay. According to her reporting, she obtained access to information that confirmed the inappropriate nature of the relationship between Todd and Riley. Messages that demonstrated boundary violations, patterns of behavior that raised serious concerns, evidence that transformed private family crisis into public revelation. Her decision to expose what she'd learned sparked immediate and intense reaction. The public response was swift and divided. Some viewers expressed shock and sympathy for Kandi, recognizing the impossible position she'd been placed in. Others questioned the validity of the claims, demanding more proof before accepting such serious allegations. Still others focused their attention on Riley, debating her level of responsibility and agency in the situation. The court of public opinion, as chaotic and judgmental as it tends to be, rendered multiple contradictory verdicts simultaneously. For Kandi, the public exposure added another layer of torment to an already unbearable situation. Private pain became entertainment. Family trauma transformed into content for consumption. Every detail dissected by strangers who felt entitled to opinions about circumstances they couldn't fully understand. The violation of privacy compounded the emotional devastation she was already experiencing, forcing her to navigate grief while under relentless scrutiny. Riley faced her own version of hell as the story spread. Judgment rained down from every direction. Social media became a minefield of accusations, condemnation, and invasive speculation about her choices, her character, and her role in the family's collapse. For a young person already struggling with guilt and confusion, the public pile-on created additional trauma that sources say left her isolated and overwhelmed. Todd, meanwhile, confronted consequences that extended far beyond the end of his marriage. His reputation, carefully built over years in the entertainment industry, took catastrophic damage. Professional relationships strained or severed entirely. Opportunities dried up as the allegations became impossible to separate from his name. Whether the full truth of what occurred will ever be definitively established remains uncertain, but the court of public opinion had already rendered its judgment, and that judgment was damning. The ripple effects extended throughout the extended family and social circles. Friendships that had seemed solid crumbled under the pressure of choosing sides. Business partnerships became uncomfortable as associates distanced themselves from the controversy. Family members found themselves pulled into the chaos, forced to navigate loyalty, truth, and self-preservation simultaneously. The destruction wasn't contained to just 3 people. It spread like wildfire through everyone connected to them. As legal proceedings moved forward, the emotional toll continued mounting. Divorce paperwork formalized what everyone already knew: the marriage was over. But paperwork doesn't heal wounds. Legal resolutions don't restore trust. And no judge's signature could undo the damage that had been done to every relationship involved. Kandi pushed forward with the determination of someone who had no choice but to survive. But those close to her described the weight she carried as nearly unbearable. The story became a cultural moment, dissected in think pieces, debated on podcasts, and analyzed across social platforms. It touched on uncomfortable topics that society often prefers to avoid. Questions about power dynamics within families, conversations about where responsibility lies when boundaries blur, debates about how much grace should be extended to young people making poor choices versus how much accountability they should face. None of these discussions had easy answers, but the Burruss-Tucker situation forced them into the open anyway. Months passed, but the intensity never fully dissipated. Each new development, each legal filing, each public appearance by any of the parties involved reignited conversation and speculation. The story refused to fade because it touched something deeper than simple celebrity gossip. It exposed the fragility of trust, the complexity of family dynamics, and the devastating consequences when boundaries fail. Kandi, by all accounts, threw herself into survival mode. Work became refuge. Her businesses demanded attention. Her public appearances required the projection of strength even when she felt anything but strong. Sources describe her as functioning on autopilot much of the time, doing what needed to be done while processing trauma that would take years to fully unpack. The performance of normalcy while internally shattered is exhausting, but it's also sometimes the only way through. Riley's journey through the aftermath involved its own unique challenges. Navigating young adulthood is difficult enough without the added burden of public scandal and family implosion. Therapy became essential. Distance from the situation provided some breathing room. But the weight of what had happened, the role she'd played, and the judgment she faced created scars that wouldn't heal quickly or easily. Those familiar with her situation describe a young woman trying to rebuild identity and self-worth from the wreckage of choices she couldn't fully undo. Todd's path forward remained uncertain. Rebuilding a reputation after this kind of controversy is extraordinarily difficult. Some people can reinvent themselves, find redemption, and eventually move past their mistakes. Others find that certain actions create permanent stains that no amount of time or effort can fully remove. Whether Todd falls into the former or latter category will be determined by his choices moving forward and society's willingness to offer second chances for boundary violations involving family members. The entertainment industry, always hungry for drama but also acutely aware of liability, responded with characteristic caution. Some doors closed permanently, others remained cracked open, waiting to see how the situation would ultimately resolve and what the long-term public perception would be. In an industry where image is currency, damaged reputation translates to diminished opportunity. The math is simple even when the human cost is complex. As time continued passing, the acute crisis phase gradually transitioned into chronic aftermath. The explosive confrontations gave way to the grinding daily reality of living with consequences. Holidays became complicated. Family gatherings required careful navigation or outright avoidance. Simple interactions carried the weight of everything that had happened. Normal, as everyone had once known it, ceased to exist and had to be painstakingly reconstructed into something new and unfamiliar. Tasha K's role in exposing the situation remained controversial. Some credited her with bringing important truths to light, arguing that sunshine is the best disinfectant and that accountability requires exposure. Others criticized her for sensationalizing private family trauma, questioning whether public interest justified the additional pain caused by widespread dissemination. The debate over where journalism ends and exploitation begins is rarely clear-cut, and this situation provided no exception. The story also sparked broader conversations about the unique pressures facing blended families, especially those in the public eye, the challenges of establishing healthy step-parent-stepchild relationships, the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries even when or especially when those boundaries feel awkward to enforce, the ways fame and constant scrutiny can distort normal family dynamics. These conversations extended far beyond just the Burruss-Tucker situation, touching on issues countless families navigate in private every day. For fans who'd followed Kandi's journey for years, the revelation felt like betrayal of a different kind. Audiences invest emotionally in the celebrities they follow, constructing narratives about who these people are based on curated glimpses into their lives. When reality shatters those narratives, it creates cognitive dissonance that's uncomfortable to navigate. Some fans doubled down on their support. Others felt deceived and withdrew entirely. The parasocial relationship that had seemed so solid proved as fragile as the family it had been built around observing. Mental health professionals watching the situation unfold from the outside emphasized the complexity of the psychological dynamics at play, the confusion that can arise in blended family situations, the vulnerability of young people to manipulation by authority figures, the devastating impact of betrayal trauma on all parties involved. Understanding these dynamics doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does provide context for how situations like this develop and why the damage runs so deep. As seasons changed and years began accumulating distance from the initial explosion, the question of healing remained open. Can Kandi ever fully trust again after this level of betrayal? Can Riley move forward without being permanently defined by this chapter of her life? Can Todd find any path toward redemption, or will this forever be the story that overshadows everything else about him? These questions don't have simple answers, and in many ways they're still being written in real time. The legal resolution of the divorce provided closure in the technical sense. Assets divided, custody arrangements established, legal ties severed. But emotional divorce is a separate process entirely, one that doesn't follow the same timeline as paperwork and court dates. Sources indicate that years after the initial crisis, all three central figures are still processing what happened, still working through layers of pain, guilt, and loss that don't resolve simply because time passes. The story stands as a stark reminder that the lives we see on television, in social media posts, and through carefully managed public appearances rarely tell the complete truth. Behind every polished image exists a complex reality filled with struggles, mistakes, and pain that doesn't make it into the highlight reel. The Burruss-Tucker situation didn't just expose one family's private crisis, it exposed the fundamental gap between public persona and private truth that exists for everyone navigating life under scrutiny. What makes this story particularly haunting is how easily it could have been prevented. Clear boundaries, honest communication, willingness to address uncomfortable dynamics before they escalated. These basic protective measures might have changed everything. But hindsight is perfect, while foresight is clouded by trust, hope, and the human tendency to believe that bad things happen to other families, not our own. The lasting impact of Tasha K's reporting continues resonating through how celebrity news gets covered and consumed. Her willingness to go beyond surface-level gossip and dig into substantive documented allegations raised both her profile and questions about the ethics of exposure. Should private family matters remain private even when they involve public figures? Where's the line between public interest and voyeuristic consumption of others' pain? These debates continue without clear resolution. For Kandi specifically, the journey forward has been about reclaiming narrative and rebuilding on her own terms. Business ventures continued, creative projects moved forward, public appearances gradually resumed with careful management and strategic messaging, but underneath the professional success and projected confidence, those close to her indicate the scars remain. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. The instinct to protect becomes hypervigilant when you've experienced violation from the inside. Riley's continued journey involves navigating young adulthood with the added burden of this very public chapter in her past. Every new relationship, every professional opportunity, every step forward carries the shadow of what happened. The work of separating her identity from this defining event is ongoing and difficult, but there are also indications of growth, maturity, and determination to be defined by more than the worst period of her life. Todd's story remains the most uncertain. Redemption arcs are possible, but they require genuine accountability, visible change, and often years of consistent demonstration that lessons have been learned. Whether he's capable of that kind of transformation or whether the damage done is irreparable remains to be seen. Public forgiveness is fickle and often incomplete. Even those willing to offer second chances rarely forget the reasons those chances became necessary. The extended family continues navigating complicated dynamics. Relationships that were damaged didn't automatically repair once the immediate crisis passed. Some connections were severed permanently, others exist in a tentative, fragile state where everyone involved walks carefully to avoid reopening wounds. Family gatherings, when they happen, carry tension that no amount of time has fully dissolved. The new normal is simply less comfortable than the old illusion ever was. As the story enters its next phase, less explosive but no less consequential, the questions that remain are profound. How do families recover from this level of betrayal? What does accountability look like when the damage is emotional rather than criminal? Can trust ever truly be restored, or does it simply become something different, something more cautious and conditional? These questions apply far beyond just the Burruss-Tucker situation. They touch on fundamental aspects of human relationship and the fragility of the bonds we assume are unbreakable. The cultural conversation sparked by this revelation continues evolving. Initial shock gave way to analysis. Analysis prompted reflection. Reflection generated broader discussions about family dynamics, power imbalances, and the specific vulnerabilities created when families blend under the additional pressure of fame and public scrutiny. These conversations matter because they help other families recognize warning signs, establish stronger boundaries, and hopefully prevent similar situations from developing. What's undeniable is that the exposure of what happened behind closed doors in the Burruss-Tucker household changed lives irreversibly. The family that existed before can never be reconstructed. The trust that was broken can't be unbroken. The pain that was inflicted can't be unfelt. Moving forward isn't about returning to what was. It's about building something entirely new from the pieces that remain, knowing those pieces are jagged, incomplete, and marked by everything that was lost. The story serves as cautionary tale about the cost of secrets and the destructive power of boundaries ignored. Every family has its private struggles, but when those struggles involve inappropriate relationships and betrayed trust, the consequences extend far beyond the immediate crisis. Healing is possible, but it's neither quick nor easy, and sometimes the best outcome is simply survival, with dignity intact. Years from now, when people look back on this chapter, they'll remember the shock of the revelations. They'll remember the debates that raged across social platforms. They'll remember Tasha K's role in forcing the conversation into the open. But hopefully they'll also remember the human beings at the center of the storm. 3 people whose lives were irrevocably altered by choices, circumstances, and the painful intersection of private crisis with public exposure. Kandi Burruss continues building her legacy, refusing to let this chapter define the entirety of her story. Riley works toward a future not overshadowed by past mistakes. Todd faces whatever consequences his actions have earned, while hopefully learning from the wreckage he helped create. None of their paths forward are easy. None of them escape the weight of what happened, but life continues anyway, messy and complicated and marked by the indelible truth that some mistakes reshape everything. The curtain that was pulled back can never be closed again. What was revealed can't be hidden. The illusion of the perfect blended family has been permanently shattered, replaced by the complicated reality of human beings making terrible choices with devastating consequences. And in that truth, uncomfortable as it is, lies a lesson worth remembering. Trust is precious. Boundaries exist for crucial reasons. And fame doesn't protect anyone from the fundamental truth that families are fragile ecosystems requiring constant care, honest communication, and unwavering commitment to protecting the vulnerable. This is the story that left Hollywood stunned, the revelation that changed everything, the family crisis that became public spectacle, And while the intensity may eventually fade, the impact will linger indefinitely. Because some stories don't just entertain, they expose uncomfortable truths about trust, betrayal, and the devastating cost when the people who are supposed to protect us become the ones we need protection from. That reality doesn't fade with time. It simply becomes part of the permanent record, a reminder that beneath every polished exterior lies a more complex and often more painful truth.